Hi there. I am back with the third and final knitting tips for beads. I finished my short row sections, the right and the left, and now I'm going to demonstrate how to work the perpendicular border. To begin the perpendicular border of the shawl, you need to cast on some stitches. For your shawl, you need to cast on 10 stitches. For mine, I'm only going to cast on 7. It's a tiny version of the beads shawl. But in essence, you work the border the same exact way. I'm going to use the cable cast on. I'm going to insert the needle knitwise between the first and second stitches and loop my A yarn around and make a stitch and mount that stitch on the left tip. Then similarly insert my needle between the first and second. In this case it's the color A and the color B between the two. Make another stitch. That gives me 2 new stitches I made, and then I continue the process until I have 10 in your case and 7 in my case. 3, and I have the 7th stitch on, I believe. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7. And again, remember that you have to cast on 10 stitches. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with A, knit 7, the stitches that I just casted on or cast on. Can never figure out what the past tense of cast on is. Knit 7. Then I'm going to knit 2 through the back loop, which means I'm going to insert my needle in behind the back loops of the next 2 stitches and knit them together. Then after I am finished with knitting the 2 through the back loops together, pick up my yarn B. Then I'm going to slip the first stitch and I'm going to knit the next to the end, but you'll notice I'm actually knitting backward, and this is so I don't keep flipping back and forth. So basically I insert the needle as if I am working in the other direction, but really I am knitting backward, and this makes this process of making this border so much faster, so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So if you learn how to make knits backward, that would be really great. And then once I'm done, I knit 7, and for you you're gonna knit 10. And once I actually see that stitch in a different color than what I've got on my needle in here, I'm going to knit 2 through the back loop, like that. And then I'm going to pick up my A yarn and I'm going to repeat the process. So I'm going to keep the yarn in front of you, so if you're turning, basically you will slip that stitch, then you'll take your yarn and you'll start knitting, and until the end, and you flip your work again, and then you knit 10, and in my case 7, and I knit 2 through the back loop. I am been working to finish my perpendicular edge. You see how it's coming along, and I'm actually finished, and I have only one stitch remaining on the left needle. At this time I have a couple of options. One is to keep this perpendicular edge like this, where I'm not going to unravel it and make a fringe out of it. To do that, basically what I need to do is take my next color, which in this case happens to be color A, and I'm going to work my row. I'm going to knit until the end of, slip one, of course, and work to the end of the row. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind off all of these stitches, and then when I get to here, I'm going to knit those two together through the back loop like I would normally do, and then bind that stitch off. So let me show you how I'm going to do this. Just normal bind off, and you don't want to tighten the stitches too much. Keep your stitches loose. Bind off all your stitches until you have only two left, where you would normally do a knit two together through the back loop. So in essence, actually you'll have one stitch remaining on the right needle and two stitches remaining on the left needle. So you want to knit those two through the back loop, and then you would bind off the stitch normally, and then basically you would just pull this thread through. I'm not going to do it right now because I want to show the second method. So you'll just pull this yarn through. Give yourself about 6 inches, about 15 centimeters. Cut the yarn, and then cut the color B yarn, weave them in, and pretty much you're done. So that's kind of the option number one, which is the option that I have worked on my sample as well, the large sample, as well as this little sample in here. I'm going to unravel now so I can show you option number two, where we're actually going to create a fringe. And I'm gonna put all my stitches back on my right needle. And in this case, actually this is also, I have to go through one more like this. So in this case, I am going to do this. I'm going to knit all the way to the last 2 stitches, and then I am going to knit those 2 together through the back loop, and I will show you. So let me just get there. I'm knitting all the way to the last 2 stitches, and then these are, can I mount these correctly? I'm going to knit those. These didn't get mounted correctly from when I picked them up, so I mounted them correctly. Then I knit them through the back loop, just like this. But now I'm going to keep these stitches on excuse me, on the needle, and I'm going to take this yarn, and I'm actually going to leave myself about a foot, or about 30 centimeters. I'm going to cut this yarn, and I have a tapestry needle. I'm going to thread the yarn through that tapestry needle, and I'm going to transition, I'm going to pull this needle through that last stitch on the tapestry needle through that last stitch on my actual needle, and then I'm going to just release. I'm gonna secure this like this. And then if I want as well, I can take this yarn in here, I can cut it probably same length as my A yarn, and I can just weave it, not weave it necessarily in because I need it for the fringe, but I'm going to secure it a little bit. You see it's kind of a bit loose, so I'll probably go through and pull it through like this so it's secure, and then just leave it. And now what I'm going to do to make my fringe is I'm going to just unravel all of the rows that I worked for hours to make. But the nice thing about this is you don't have to work for hours to cut yarn and place a fringe, and you're pretty much guaranteed that those are going to be the same length. So just gonna go down and unravel this all the way. And what's really nice is you can see here this chain, and it's kind of holding the loops together. And basically you're just gonna spend some time going through and unraveling all the way from one end to the other. Since I only unraveled the border with this sample scarf that I used for the tutorial videos, I discovered that when I unraveled to the end, that last loop is longer than the previous other loops, and there is about an inch, 2 inches or so. My solution is to actually tie this like that and tie it, make a knot, and then trim it to match. However, if you don't want it, rather trim it to match, so basically then you'll have the ends in here, which also I put a knot in, and then I can trim these tail yarns to match as well. However, you do have another option. If you don't like to make a knot and trim this, and you want to keep it as a continuous loop, just weave it in a little bit back and forth on the edge, and then bring it back out so it's actually even with the other loops. This is my last tip for the beads design. I hope you enjoyed following along with me, and I hope you decide to make this shawl and you enjoy working through it. Thank you again for watching, and happy knitting.